Good morning and welcome. Looks like I need to continue. All right. Good morning. I'm Kathy Wells. I'm president of the Coalition of Little Rock Neighborhoods. We're conducting this meeting by Zoom the morning of Saturday, July the 10th, 2021. Welcome all who have joined us. We'd like to start by introducing ourselves. I will say that I'm originally a member from the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Mary, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Mary Henthorne. I live in Andover Square off Cantrell, and I provide tech support as I can to the group. I love the opportunity to support you.
Paul, tell us yourself.
My name is Paul Dodds. I live in the Central High area at the corner of Park and 17th Street, and have been sort of chipping away at renovating mostly unsafe and vacant houses around here for 17 years, and have a number of rental properties. And as of February, with the encouragement of my dear neighbors, converted one bedroom into an Airbnb, and now I'm in the process of doing another.
Okay. How about Bobby Matthews and White?
Hey everyone. So I'm Bobby. This is Angela. We're on 15th and Summit. So we're just a couple of blocks in front of the Central High. So we're in the Central High neighborhood also. But yeah, we have we've fixed up and renovated the house next door, and have a short-term rental in it. And here we're at the meeting.
We are also planning, we have already bought a couple of other properties that we intend to convert to Airbnbs as well. In the
So the small business empire grows. Thank you for that.
Slowly.
Robert Walker, introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. I am Robert Walker, a member of the Capitol View Station Neighborhood Association. I live a block from an Airbnb being rented out by a neighbor on the same block. And as a total non sequitur, for the public safety issue, I believe every major bridge should have a pedestrian underpass put right underneath the major frame members, and a boat ramp, because a kayaker saw a crack on the I-40 bridge years ago. Now, this is a public safety issue. It has nothing to do with the fact that I like to pedal, walk, and paddle.
Thank you, Robert. John Hedrick, introduce yourself, please.
John Hedrick, Vice President, Downtown Neighborhood Association, live on 15th between Cumberland and Rock, and also a member of the Petaway Association.
And Lindsay, introduce yourself, please.
Hey, I'm Lindsay Berner, and this is my wife, Crystal. We live in MacArthur Park, technically. We're at the corner of Daisy Bates and Rock, and we just bought in February the home across the street, which is a 2-bedroom that we've turned into an Airbnb.
Welcome. Let's see, I believe that's everyone currently with us. I am an amateur at this, so please feel free to call to my attention anything that I am getting wrong and needs to be fixed.
Hey, Kathy, it's Norman. I'm president of the Heights Neighborhood Association. So
we have a newcomer. Norman, that was poor sound quality. Could you repeat your introduction of yourself, please?
yeah, Norman Hodges. I'm president of the Heights Neighborhood Association.
Welcome. Thank you for coming out. Okay, Paul Dodds is our guest speaker. The subject is the city's proposed draft.
I think we have one more. I think I see a Jan.
Have we got another one?
Waving at. Hey, Jan.
Hey,
Right.
I'm Jan Baker.
Introduce yourself, friend. Thank you.
I'm Jan Baker. I'm with the Little Rock Sustainability Commission, and this is my first in-person meeting. I look at your YouTube videos, but I wanted to participate, and Kathy's let me. Thank you.
You're entirely welcome. We appreciate the civic-minded. Okay.
Sorry to cut you off, Kathy. I saw her waving, and I know
Thank you. I am
Sorry about that.
for See, I don't handle this tech as well as I should, so I need a lot of help from my friends. Thanks again. Oh, so we're back to the topic, which is the short-term rental proposals from the city, which had a lot of questionable elements in it. And so when the discussion began in civic circles, we ended up saying, let's continue the discussion at our monthly coalition meeting today. We, as I said earlier, and I'll repeat this announcement, found just in the last day, parallel to all of our city discussions, Quapaw Quarter Association had proposed regulations before the Capital Zoning District Historic Commission. They will be discussing, but not coming to any action, at 4 o'clock this coming Thursday, July the 15th. On the Capital Zoning website is the agenda with the link to participate there by Zoom. And they have a quantity of material also available by online link to research they have done, comparison with other cities and their experiences. And that is grist for our mill. I have pointed out to the city planning director that he should treat this as a resource, just to make sure that all the folks know everything that's out there for a resource, which we take pride in doing at the coalition here. So at this point, give us the fruits of all your many discussions, Paul, and where things stand and what happens next, please.
Thanks very much, Kathy. I really appreciate your inviting me to participate in this meeting. Let me just give a little background about myself and what I do in my alter ego, as opposed to being the ruined person of Central High. I'm a lawyer, and I do a lot of international work. I mostly work for the US government, the State Department, and other governments, World Bank, on business enabling environment regulation. So I go all over the world to countries to advise them on how to encourage investment and how to structure regulations in a way that balances the interests of business and administration and diminishes corruption, and establishes kind of clear rules that business can live by, that protects consumers. I've done quite a lot of work in agriculture and tourism and public-private partnerships. Anyway, it's just that's my background. So I have about 20 years of experience doing this. And when I first moved to Little Rock and started looking around my corner, I discovered a business enabling environment from hell, which still remains. We have tremendous difficulties clearing title. We have real problems with air properties, with people who will be dead for 27 years and still brought to court for failure to maintain their building. They have a failure to appear, but it's just, things are just not working in just many levels here. I've worked very hard I taught a course at the law school on ruins and weed lots, and turned into a whole pile of legislative change to deal with unsafe and vacant properties, which Little Rock has not actually used. They haven't conformed their ordinances. I'm working with neighbors here, including Angela, to try to help turn that around. And I was not expecting, my normal experience with Little Rock on my side of the interstate is that laws go flouted for years. There aren't inspections. I've seen commercial buildings around me in the 17 years I've been here. I've seen four commercial buildings fall down for lack of inspection, just fall down. Simmons Smith's building fell down on Wright Avenue. There was one on MLK that fell down. Ponder's Drugstore fell down, and there was one on Wright Avenue. There's one on 13th and Woodrow that fell down. So that's my experience, is people will go for a decade or 15, 20 years to environmental court and nothing happens. So I wasn't actually expecting overregulation to be my problem. So when it happened, I was stunned. This draft ordinance is written basically in a way that will put virtually all short-term rentals under an impossible administrative burden. I have my one experiment so far is a 600 square foot apartment in a Victorian house that I renovated 13 years ago. I've renovated again this past year, and I was renting to a professor at Euler who went back to Washington, and was talking to Angela and Bobby and my other neighbor with an Airbnb, and I was like, yeah, sure, why not? I'll give it a try. If I wanted to, I own the house. The house is just far enough away from me. It's not adjacent. It's like sitting here. I can see it from, I can point at it. It's right there. It's from my study. And if the number of property, other properties I own in a LLC, which I own personally, both for that house and any LLC owned properties, if I were to go through the requirements of this ordinance, I would have to get a planned zoning district, which would require the full approval of the city board. It is a process that is incredibly onerous. It's designed for 500 unit buildings, 500 unit developments in Chenal. When the city, when the planning commission was trying to, Jamie Collins was very eager to get approval for the Brookside properties. And they were, the people who were opposing it in the neighborhood level were trying to have it go through a planned zoning district. And Jamie's on tape saying, no, that's too complicated for this process. So somehow for that 240 unit proposed new development, the planned zoning district process is too complicated. But for my 600 square foot, 1 bedroom existing unit to convert it to an Airbnb, it's not too complicated. It's just fine. It's not fine. It is incredibly burdensome. It would cost thousands of dollars to do. And there's no public safety and health justification for it. There's a lot that can be done to regulate Airbnbs, to license Airbnbs, to have people pay taxes. I am of the opinion, until someone tells me otherwise, because I haven't been able to find it, that I do not know what basis the city currently has for regulating Airbnbs as commerce. I've been looking in the statutes, trying to find it. I can't find it anywhere. Maybe it's there somewhere. But they're basing this on what I think is a sort of, and Jamie Collins didn't tell me where it is. I think it may be in a fire code. I think they're basically regulating lodging houses. It's based on boarding house rules. Now, I'm not against regulating boarding houses. I would actually be kind of glad if they were to take some of the houses where they pack 10 guys into a 3-bedroom house and charge them $110 a week around the corner from me after they get out of prison or when they're barely sober, and do some regulation. Like, if that were to happen, I would be okay with that. Like, I think that people are being exploited all around me, but that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about a freestanding independent unit. 75%, about 75% of the Airbnbs in town are apartments or houses that have been set aside by their owners for Airbnb use. The rest, 2% are shared rooms, and the rest of them are a bedroom that someone will rent out, kind of a grandmother can rent a bedroom. The city, as far as I can tell, has no idea about how many Airbnbs there are. I think this will be posted. They want to, once I go through this very complicated process of getting full board approval, then I'm subject to annual inspections, including fire marshal, which is okay. I think that all rental properties should be subject to inspections. I think that's a good idea. I think we actually have a good statute for it. We have a good ordinance for it. Now, if they would actually allocate the money to enforce it, I would be glad. But there's very, very lax enforcement of the rental property rules. I'm not someone who fights warranties of habitability from landlords. I think, people should be required to rent properties that people can live in safely. That's what I do. But so you have these very, very strict the inspections with the fire marshal and evacuation plans, all of which make sense for a hotel, perhaps, or for a boarding house, but don't make sense for an existing current property. There's also a lot of the concerns. There are a number of legitimate concerns about Airbnbs, which I am not going to minimize here. I think noise is a really big concern. There are party houses around, and I don't want a party house. I don't have a party house. And one of as Angela and Bobby were helping me get started, they gave me a lot of really wise advice. I don't rent to people from within 50 miles of Little Rock unless they get special permission. And because, I used to do instant book, and like after one woman had her photographer visit and then had a boa with a lot of feathers in the room, it's like, I don't want feathers the next day. I don't know what the photographer and the boa is doing here. So like, like no more boas, no more photographers, and So my impression is that there can be a lot of people coming from within 50 miles who are there to do something their parents or their spouses don't want, or to, gamble, whatever they're doing. It's like, I don't want that activity. So I basically, I had one guy who, lives in Mableville and has a 9-year-old son, and he's divorced, and he had custody for the weekend, and he wanted to give his son a special treat so that he could be in a great place downtown and be close to sites. And that was fine. Maybe he stayed for 2 days. But I asked people, so I tried to find out. I mean, I live right here. This is like, I have a tenant, and it's a duplex. I have a tenant next door. I don't want to disturb her. So there's ways that there's ways with occupancy. There's ways with there's a lot of ways that you could regulate to minimize the noise problem, minimize the disturbance, minimize the excess number of occupants. A friend of mine told me about a friend of hers who had recently sold an 800 square foot house in Kamek Village and now is advertising on Airbnb for 8 people. That's too many. I mean, clearly, right, 8 people for 800 square feet. And that's the kind of horror story that people sort of go, oh my God, Airbnbs are going to ruin the neighborhood. It's just awful. We can't have it. It can't have it happen. And I think that those
parking, we have no more than on-street parking in these neighborhoods. I went to the Airbnb for Little Rock just to see what they were offering. And sure enough, they're in our neighborhoods that are members of this coalition, that are in the historic area, that are in the older parts of Little Rock, which have no off-street parking very often. So how do you grapple with the comings and the goings and the parking on the street?
Well, first, let's look at, that's a real question of occupancy. And let's start from the base that these are, if it's a rental property, like I would be allowed to rent this apartment as an owner. I could rent it to, I could rent it to 4 people. I wouldn't have the most I've ever rented it to is 1. But I can rent to 1 or 2 people would live in this apartment. So that might be 2 cars. And that would be my, that's how much the sort of the baseline of this as a rental would be 1 or 2 cars. As an Airbnb, if I have the occupancy also set at that, like I don't allow more than 2 occupants for my current Airbnb. I just don't, I don't want it. It's a 1 bedroom. I thought about, should I get a sofa bed? And I said, no, I'm not going to get a sofa bed. I don't want more people. I've got a sofa bed in the next one so someone can have a kid stay have an overnight, but I probably will only allow 2 adults and a child just so that they can have something with the kid can be there. But I don't want 4 or 5 people in these units. They're 1 bedroom units. So I think that for the parking, you've got to look at the occupancy. And it also, one of the things that's really important is to look neighborhood specific. I mean, our problem in this neighborhood is not parking, it's depopulation. I mean, I have vacant houses all around me. I think probably 30% of the houses in this neighborhood are vacant. And I mean, we are on the razor's edge of losing our historic status because of continued loss of historic properties. I think we're something like 53%, and in order to stay a historic district, we have to be above 51%. So I think that one of the things that Angela and Bobby and I have talked a lot about is how to devolve more of this decision making to a neighborhood level. And I think that parking is a neighborhood issue. I live in a corner lot, and I think I have like 10 or 12 parking spaces that no one ever parks in around my house. The house I've got here is a corner lot. There's about 10 or 12 parking spaces. So I think it really is I would devolve that to the neighborhood to try to resolve like what parking is needed and what problem could be brought. So I think, noise and parking are the 2 big issues. A 3rd issue is the other issues are a lot harder to there's this sort of a generalized sort of crime and fire issue, but there's no data. And this is one of the things I keep asking you. It's like, what is your basis for, like, what's the problem that you've identified and what data is there for this problem identification that we can sort of work with, especially if you're doing a very strict kind of regulation, which this is. How many Airbnbs have actually had fires? How many have had police calls? And I think that one of the things this ordinance does, since it's basically kind of boarding house ordinance expanded, I think it kind of throws everybody into the wrong category because we're not boarding houses. You know, I am very different from the sober halfway house around the corner. I mean, this is not what I've got. These are reviewed. These are constantly, I mean, I have guest review after guest review. If I don't get I'm a super host. Like, I very jealously guard my super host status. And if I don't keep above a 4, 8, 5 something, Airbnb like punishes me brutally. Like, I drop down, the algorithm throws me to the bottom of the pot, and then I don't get reviews. So I have to this is not like, I mean, no one's submitting reviews for Imran Bora, are they? I mean, that isn't what happens around here. It's, there's no reviews for landlords. I mean, we get reviews all the time. So I think and anybody can look up the reviews. We're very easy to find. Just find us. We're hiding in plain sight. And I think that.
Does that mean that there's an inspection when you signed on with Airbnb? Did anyone physically come to your property and look at it from the Airbnb?
No, I have like 50 pictures of the property. I mean, I show, if anything, if those pictures and what's in reality don't line up, I'll get nicked in a review, and Airbnb will look at it and say, wait a second, they said this coffee pot was there, it's not there. I mean, it's like, I worry about changing out a chair without changing all of the photographs. I actually done that. I probably should. I need to go back and change my photographs. There was an upholstered chair that got ripped. But it's sort of, I mean, that's, they don't really need to, because people are coming and going and talking about these places all the time. I mean, everybody who goes writes a review.
A point of information here. When I contacted the Advertising and Promotion Commission, they wouldn't give me what I'd asked for. They said it's a secret, the addresses of the people paying room tax to them. Seems to be a little protectiveness going on there, because I didn't ask how much, you understand, just where they were when they paid the tax. But they did have an annual report available on the A&P site that says in 2020, there were 473 short-term rentals. So they're tracking it from their income for paid room rents.
Okay.
I know that one of the concerns legitimately government has is we want to collect the enterprise that should be paying the city. And so I think that one of the things that we need to be making sure we take care of, and which is a fair point, is how they might collect from someone who's not getting automatically remitted money, like from the Marriott Hotel or Airbnb. Is there anybody else out there renting that is evading the room rent? Do we know?
Well, I've been in close touch with the regulatory affairs representative of Airbnb to find out sort of what's going on, and to sort of get advice from them about comparable ordinances and what people are doing. And I believe Airbnb voluntarily pays the sales tax. They take the sales tax and the hamburger tax. And so all of I don't touch it. And I've written sort of say, gee, is there any way I can find out what's been paid on my behalf? Because if I'm responsible for it, I want to know. And I haven't gotten any response, but I need to follow up with the A&P.
Are you not getting copies of the receipted bills, because it's a line item on the bill, just like your hotel, Marriott?
Right. It's a line item. It's a line item on the bill, but I only get that. Well, it's a line item on one of the many things. I only get that if I don't get confirmation from the A&P that they've received it. I just get Airbnb saying it was charged.
Oh, well, yes.
But what this guy, Luis from Airbnb, said is that they pay it voluntarily. He thinks that vacation rental by owner, VRBO, which is their main competitor, does not withhold it. So they would actually like to see that happen. So one of the things that the Airbnb would like to see is an ordinance that levels the playing field, that has the that has Airbnbs and it basically has all of those short-term sort of internet-based rentals. I think it's one of the things that sort of for framing the conversation, I think it's good to talk about this as sort of a web-based rental. I mean, that really, these are the ones that people rent online that are constantly reviewed. I mean, just again, to distinguish them from boarding houses. But that I think all of them should be required. I mean, the owners should be required to be registered. The property should be subject to the same regular inspections that you have for rental properties. Maybe there should be a fee charged so that they can actually afford to do that. Now, the way that they've got it written, the fire marshal and the planning people would do the inspections, where in fact it probably should be the code enforcement from the housing and neighborhood development, because
there's a real concern about adding a single duty to the current rental inspection staff.
Okay, well, when I was talking to Jamie, someone asked Jamie, like, how many inspections do they think he could actually do a year with his current staff? And he said, well, maybe we could do 50. If we had to do 200, they'd be crushed. Which to me says that if they have 400, if they have almost 500 like money paying Airbnbs, and there's hundreds of others that aren't paying, like, how are they going to catch up with that? Like, what is their proposal for staffing these inspections? Because if I don't get inspected, I can lose my license. And what if they never get to the inspections? I mean, the whole thing, I mean, this is set up. Once you get your license, the way this rule is written, you have to be available 24/7 to respond within 60 minutes to a complaint of an unreasonable disturbance from anybody, doesn't know who, could be anybody just claiming this is unreasonable, I'm disturbed. And if you don't respond within 60 minutes, you can lose your license, 24/7. I mean, nobody else in the city is subject to that kind of burden. I mean, no landlord is subject. And you basically, they also were trying to impose liability for actions of the guests. It's like, wait, like, where does this come from? I mean, it is such a heavy kind of.
Excuse me, say that again, please.
What?
The host owner is responsible for bad behavior or law breaking of the guest?
Yes, you can basically lose your license if your guest breaks the law, because you've had a complaint against you.
Robert Walker has a question.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Robert Walker.
Well, basically I would kind of characterize Paul as a good, landlord. In other words, he's pointing out the way he does the best. And I think we should all worry more about what are the problems. Could one exist and bother the neighborhood? Because, I mean, I live 2 blocks from a house where the people believe that it's okay to have a rock and roll band playing in the afternoon that I can hear, and I don't think it's okay, but this is just an ordinary house. And I live across the street from a 10-unit apartment complex that has a paid parking lot behind it, but those people are always parking on the one-way street that my house is on because they don't want to walk around the building to the parking lot. And the apartments are so small, they only have to have one door, which I think is a shame, because any one-door apartment is a fire trap waiting for the fire. So I can understand that Paul's objecting to a lot of these regulations, and they should be looked at. But basically, we are worried about are the worst examples. Now, I rented an Airbnb in Chicago, and basically what I got was, it would have been easier to shift to a simple motel and pay about the same amount and have a motel features. But we got to consider that this helps the money flow. It keeps houses occupied and keeps money flowing into a neighborhood. Now, the owner may be somewhere else spending the money, but at least it's keeping the economy going.
Good points that I think folks in the coalition are very, very alive to. We're trying to help revitalize these neighborhoods. We're trying to assist owners in capitalizing on their assets, particularly the historic homes that are so beautiful. And it's a small business enterprise that we have reason to think that the city ought to be supporting, not suppressing. The question is how we get from here to there, I think.
My impression is that there are, I mean, there were areas where Airbnbs are real concern. And the QQA looked at New Orleans, for instance. They looked at New Orleans, San Francisco, and Nashville, I think, and Fayetteville, which are very different from Little Rock. And apparently someone said, I can't remember who, that in New Orleans, the Hilton bought 100 houses, threw everybody out and turned them into Airbnbs. And that's the kind of thing you don't want to have happen. You don't want to have someone, you know, like a real estate investment trust or big investor, you know, closing down, you know, throwing everybody out of an apartment complex in Shackleford and turning them into Airbnbs. You don't want to have major displacement. You know, you do need to protect tenants to some degree. And there are, I mean, there's, you know, I've traveled a lot and there's places you go, it's like, God, there's no one living here. It's like this neighborhood is basically an extended hotel room. And people don't want that. You want to have sort of a neighborhood feel retained, but where that,
Instead of density standard, Paul?
Well, there are, I mean, the QQA is suggesting a density standard, and I think that this is something, but it's a very rigid one. Like, for instance, it may make sense to do areas where, like I was talking to someone, there's an area in Petaway where there's 3 houses in a row that are Airbnbs, that are brand new houses, and they're doing fine. And you know, the Airbnbs help justify the expenditure. Now, under the QQA's density standards, 2 of the 3 would have to be shut down. Why? Like there's an Airbnb down Park Street. Carol Worley built the first new construction, basically market new construction, other than maybe 2 houses. Irma Hunter Brown built a house in the past 60 years, and then there's one house that's now, after 10 years of vacancy, has been now taken. Now it's a bunch of guys on parole. Those are the 2 new constructions in my neighborhood that weren't subsidized housing for 60 years between the interstate and Roosevelt and MLK and the tracks. But now Carol Worley built 3 on Park Street behind Central High. One is an Airbnb, and I see that there was a sort of crummy warehouse that was torn down, and that lot's been leveled. Now, that actually, maybe that should be like kind of an Airbnb colony. I mean, it's working. Someone's renting it. It's like, hallelujah, someone's actually building something. No one's built anything here for years. People are renovating, but it makes no sense to build new here. It just doesn't make sense with all the unsafe and vacant houses. It just, and with the price of reconstruction, like I can only do what I do with historic tax credits. I can't make new construction make sense. And I have a number of lots. Someday I'd like to build on them, but I'm thinking it's like density, sort of Airbnb density, okay, but let's carve out, like if you're competing against, if you just have vacant houses and vacant lots, then maybe Airbnbs shouldn't be that much of a worry. You know,
Paul, is there a model ordinance from another community that you would find helpful to propose for consideration here?
I'm trying to get the guy from Airbnb he's going to be hosting a webinar for hosts. I'm hoping next week, and he's on vacation this week, and I want to try to get a model ordinance from him. I mean, basically, pay taxes, have inspections, get licensed, be really careful about noise, and limit occupancies to what's required as a rental property, and so people and have people know who the owners are. I think they kind of prefer the minimum. I think that, like me and my neighbors, I know that people we've talked about in our group, we really want to see local ownership. We want to see people who are,
yeah, but you're not going to be able, I think, to do that legally. Property goes to property.
Well, probably not, but I was kind of like, I just don't, maybe there's something that can be done. I mean, right now.
Well, remember the registered agent, Paul.
What's that?
If somebody from Memphis decides to buy up a block of property and turn it into rentals, I'm sure that the registered agent for out of the community owner would apply. And there would have to be somebody living in the city of Little Rock who could be contacted in the event there was a problem with that rental. So that's an easy response.
Yeah.
If, you can't keep them out, but you can, by golly, say, you got to have boots on the ground in Little Rock. We've got that already. And one thing else to keep in mind here is that there are business licenses to be paid.
Right.
And these are all public, and they are on the city's data portal. And you can go to Citizen Connect on littlerock.gov. and you can go to business licenses and you can see what is on a map in your area. Now that's going to pick up more things than this. There may be some refinements Mary can help us with, and we'll send out an email about that. But if you want to see who's buying business licenses, which would include rentals today and those boarding houses you talked about, that is readily available public information, which is updated every Monday.
No.
So we've got some resources to be looking at what's in our neighborhoods now and what we think should be refined. And I'm going to say, let's go on and wrap this up maybe in another 5 or 10 minutes, because we are respectful of time and we do want to talk about some sales tax issues that we have developed. So, yes,
Kathy, I have a question.
please.
I have a question for Paul. Did you say that the proposed ordinance would require a planned unit development for these?
It would require a PZD. You would have to either, for anybody, unless it's basically on your own property, or basically unless it's, you can have an accessory structure within like 50 feet, something like that. Unless it's on your own property, you'd have to have a PZD. If it's on your own property, you would get a special use permit, which can be, but so you know, you'd have to go to the full city board and do the same PZD process as for a full new development, even though there's no change in the existing structure.
But they're really cracking down on buying that house down the block.
What's that?
Not where you're living. If you're not living on the premises, they are really cracking down. That's
Yeah,
what
they're
the
cracking,
plans
even if you're living on the
district.
premises, they're cracking down. You still have to, you know, submit, you still have to send out a letter to everyone within 200 feet, and you have to go through the whole special use permit exception. So, you know, all the grandmothers who are renting out their guest rooms are going to be, they better stop it or they'll be arrested.
So just so I can clarify, what's a PZD? I mean, what's that stand for?
It stands for planning district.
Say that again, Paul.
I think it's, I'm not that much, I think it's planned zoning district. Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong. It's planned.
I think that's right.
Okay.
No,
My
it's
other
an
question
existing
is, can there be a square foot per renter thing? Like if they've got 8 people in what should be a 4-person house, can you say, you know, only, you know, 1 person for every 200 square feet or whatever that might be?
There certainly could be. I think there's the existing rule is, I believe, is you're not allowed to have more than 4 unrelated people plus a domestic servant live in any house.
In rentals. There is a rental restriction now, Norman,
In rental.
that we could readily bring into this discussion for this purpose.
Yeah, and I think the rentals do also have, they have minimum size requirements for amount of bedroom space, I think.
100 square foot per person in a bedroom.
Okay, so you can have a 200 square foot bedroom. So yeah, I think it's, you know, you might want to look at those and tweak it a bit to have it, you know, especially, again, the concern seems to be really party houses where people come in. I have quiet hours. It's 9 to 9 quiet hours. I have, you know, I restrict visitors. I don't allow smoking. You know.
Well, we've got your standard nuisance complaint to the police. It's interesting that they hold the host to such standards of instant response, especially if you're not around the property. I can understand they are not going to let you off the hook, but it certainly sounds like the kind of a thing that can be resolved. It would be interesting to find out from the standpoint of hosts and rentals what other cities are doing that they find to be good policy that they would recommend here, since there is so many issues and objections to what the city has drafted. And I certainly encourage folks to get a copy of the material coming through Capital Zoning District Commission, because that will have some weight at City Hall, we know.
A couple of last points. One of the things that is, it's hard to tell what the impetus for this is. I mean, hotels have been freaking out about short-term rentals since they first came on, since sort of this phenomenon first appeared. I don't know if this is being pushed by sort of hotel lobbyists or not. It's, you know, who knows. I had another point what I was going to say, which I forgot. Oh, this is, yeah. One of the things you want to be careful about is sort of protecting against vigilantes, you know, whether they're competitors or people who are just out to get, you know, out to get short-term rentals, or people who are like, you know, gee, I don't, there's, you know, basically, I don't want to see a black person, you know, coming and going from a house near me. I don't feel comfortable about my neighborhood tone being, you know, being unprotected. And I think in Springfield, Missouri, apparently they in their STR regulation, they basically will kind of get people prosecuted for perjury if they file a complaint against an unwarranted complaint against a short-term rental. Sort of like, rather than having you be completely exposed to anybody complaining about anything, which is what the current proposal is.
Wow. A lot of tensions there. Does anyone else have any closing questions or remarks as we bring this discussion to a close for the time being? Obviously, we will continue by email and otherwise.
Robert Walker has a question.
Robert.
I want to point out that a lot of Airbnb will be self-regulation because people post comments about where they stay and what it was like and so forth. And if you get a few negative comments, that's going to be it. So it's going to be self-regulating in that respect. I can't imagine anybody saying, hey, we had a great time at this party house and really trashed it. So that's not going to show up as a comment. But if they're trying to rent, you know, a 4-bedroom and each one occupied, somebody will say something. Whereas I will say that I saw a bed for $20 close to the O'Hare airport, and I said, that is all I need. So $20 for a night in a bed, I wouldn't care if it was a 4-bedroom, if it was close to the O'Hare airport and I could sleep between flights.
Well, we might need to be collecting some actual experience reports to educate folks in the city draft regulation department about all this. You talked about losing your status, Paul. Is there something in this activity that is on record that we could submit to Jamie Collins, the planning director, about this is how it works and this is how people succeed and this is how those who are inferior fail?
Well, one of the things I suggested to a city director about putting a bug in Jamie's ear was, I wonder if he's opened an Airbnb account, have him go and look and see what's on offer in Little Rock. Get a sense of what these properties are. And
well, I sent that out with the invitation to this meeting,
yeah,
to just go online and see what they're offering.
Exactly.
And they're all around. They're in Central High, they're in Petaway, they're in the historic district. You know, they're here now. And that was just the super host.
Yeah,
So,
and they're quiet. And I think that that's the thing that, you know, they're, because most of the time they aren't causing any problems. Like Cappy thought she didn't have any of her districts. It's like, you probably do. You just don't know about them because they're not bothering anybody. I think what part of it's also the hosts don't know each other. And we're totally, you know, we're this amorphous, it's like we're not socially networked as hosts. We count on, like Airbnb is going to give the first introduction next week in this webinar so we can find each other. And like Antoinette was trying to find Airbnb hosts in Hillcrest to reach out to them, to talk to them. And she had to like contact each one individually to try pretend she was making a reservation. And then after 10, they wouldn't let her do anymore. And she got nicked in her like status. And, you know, she was talking to Luis about, is there any way that you can, you know, let us meet each other? And he has all these privacy rules about, but the only thing we can do is he'll invite people to this webinar and then we'll try to collect each other's contact information so that we can start to get networked. It's just, so it's like, it's hard for us, even though we're visible, it's hard for us to find each other to actually organize and have a voice.
well, okay, we will work on that. Anybody have any other closing comments? Thank you all very much for taking part in that discussion. Thank you, Paul. We will be in touch and relay to folks by email the fruits of your further labors. and called the capital zoning activity and on, around, and about. Let's now turn to the sales tax discussion. We have been providing research all along. You may be tired of what I'm giving you, but I did want to call your attention to the latest summary that I got out just yesterday on the money allocation resolution that was voted in the final form by city directors, which is still not a legally binding document, but it is their statement of intent about how they would allocate the money. And we still have some missing information. I am going to try and get, once again, some indication about a location for this indoor sports complex, which is to be built for $37 million, which would then be maintained on operations for $8 million a year. It's not expected to pay for itself, so it would be continuing a line item for the city budget. The consultant's report on this was puzzling to me. Obviously, the appeal of these things just escapes me for a lot of reasons. They had listed 8 possible locations, and one of them was War Memorial, but the notation beside that was they're going to have to find a place to site a building, because these are all indoor courts for soccer and basketball, that's 100,000 square feet plus. So they'd pave over a lot of green space. And if they went to Coleman Park, there would be in the floodplain. If they went to Rebsamen Park, they would wipe out the golf course. So it's very puzzling to me about that whole category of activity. And at the same time, I noticed that as we did a decade ago, the amount allocated for streets and drainage, $41,750,000, was way far short of the $500 million. Oh, I'm sorry, I made a typo on my thing. Well, I'll send out a fresh one. But I couldn't get anyone to tell me what the staff today totals the needs for city streets, but I'm pretty sure we've been chasing that one for a decade and not come near to successfully providing most of that need. So if they're already going to spend 41 million, you wonder about spending a lot more and getting a lot closer to $500 million in needs. And then we naturally are researching the unsafe and vacant houses and lots. And what we did there was we wanted to call attention to the fact that the city is now talking about their unsafe and vacant list of 525 houses that would be targeted for redevelopment with the money that they would put out there. When we found a significant resource in the information compiled in a survey of a portion of the city, the elder neighborhoods where we all live, a few years ago in 2016, and that local analysis, once Mary, thank you, Mary, had removed the duplicates. So we had a single list of addresses, and there were 2,854 lots and some houses that should be addressed. So once again, we have to ask how far toward the conclusion of need would we reach with these allocations of money? And how would they allocate the housing between any owner occupied as well as vacant houses, as well as vacant lots to redevelop? And there's also a category for homeless, which, as I understand, is focused on building some more of those duplexes. They've done a couple of through Jericho Way right now. So that's extremely lacking in detail. And so that's a concern that we've got. And I just want to know what the rest of you are concluding after looking at the spending list. Is there something else that you think we ought to be researching in more detail? Anyone? Robert?
Doesn't the city of Little Rock have like $1 billion worth of infrastructure they need to repair that is being paid for by a tax that I think they're not even talking about renewing now because they want us to pay this 1 cent? And the thing that really boggles me, now the cities and government is used to providing infrastructure to businesses that's providing jobs. So they'll put in roads and they'll put in sewage and water, and they will spend a lot of money to get a business going. But in this case, we are shifting to let's project a business, let's totally fund a business that might work. But on the other hand, what if something like a pandemic occurred and you could not use that sport complex for 1.5 years? I mean, do pandemics ever occur?
Well, they would use it for 85 days a year in the consultant analysis in standard operations. And it's not the kind of structure that could be readily used for other community activities. So that's a puzzler to me. It just, and Jan, thank you for pointing out when you compare this list of proposed spending to any policies of sustainable government operations, they're missing and lacking. Now, do I understand from your remarks that we did have a sustainable city government proposal? Was it an adopted policy?
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to Jan Baker. Yes, ma'am.
No, my understanding is this administration is going to be developing a sustainability policy through the use of the Clinton School sometime in September, where they'll go out into the community and ask questions and then develop a policy. In the meantime, the Little Rock Sustainability Commission has been asked to look at all the policies and procedures that might be relevant to sustainability and make comments about them. We don't know yet when that we would be tasked to actually do that. I asked James Owen, who is the liaison between the city administration and the Little Rock Sustainability Commission, whether each of the departments has its own policies and procedures manuals, you know, so that we could look at policies. And he was unable to answer that question in our meeting in June. And will get back to me on that in July, I suppose. The city doesn't really have a sustainability policy. The Little Rock Sustainability Commission itself had a 2020 roadmap that expired in 2020. It ran from 2015 to 2020, and we were writing a new one for a 5-year plan. It was the 2020 plus plan, which was written in January of 2020, which has not been implemented at all, period, zero, because we had COVID and so we are operating, the Little Rock Sustainability Commission is operating without a long-term plan. We just sort of, well, commissions.
What would have been in it? What was in it? What does it plan do?
Well, it was a huge plan, but it would be like by 2025, the city would have alternative forms of energy use, like solar. There would be an audit, which the Little Rock Sustainability Commission actually did. We'd audited a handful of city-owned buildings to see if they were overspending on the cost of electricity and gas, and how they could lower that cost by just doing some minimal things, not even creating solar, just by, oh, I don't know, like
efficiency.
if just some efficient, change the light bulbs. That's one of the things the city has said 50 million times. They changed the light bulbs in city buildings. Okay, that's their sustainability. That's what they call sustainability. They, in the 1 cent sales tax, they are, they're fixing City Hall, and they're going to fix the Willie Hinton community building, but they don't tell you what they're going to do to fix it. There was a plan in the 2020 plan that the sustainability had would be to do green rooftops. They did one in the annex behind City Hall, and that's as far as it went. I think Stodolo was up there on top of it doing a video. And then, of course, he's not there anymore. This Mayor Scott seems to be preoccupied with bringing in new business and making money, and sustainability is not on his radar, at least at this point.
Well, he's certainly interested in bringing in new business. That economic development spending resolution line item made a note that the $30 million capital investment in economic development was basically spending to be directed to the Little Rock Port.
Yeah,
and there was a reference to attracting a new enterprise, which would be major heavy industry payroll. That's puzzled me because I've been hearing that we weren't doing any more heavy industry pretty much. So.
Well, we're real excited because we got Amazon down there. It's a distribution center. But if you look at some information on Amazon, which I'm still asking about, when you return something to Amazon and then you don't want it back again ever, I read an article that said Amazon uses the city dumps to dump that crap into the city dump. So I had a question to ask the mayor. When you signed the contract, did you talk about what would happen to the waste that was being generated by Amazon? And we're still waiting, I believe, on an answer for that. But that is a big concern.
You've got some records of doing this in other cities that have these facilities? Have we kind of documented that?
No.
That would be good.
There have been several articles in There have been several articles in newspapers in the past week that I've noticed talking about what happens when you return Amazon products to them. Frequently, they're just dumped.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't try to resell them, even if they're presumably good. It's just not what you wanted. They don't bother with that. It's not cost efficient to return it to their inventory, so they just burn it, dump it, or whatever.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying, or that's the question, is that part of the procedure for this Amazon group that's coming out of the port? And I was told that no, they're just a distribution center. They just send stuff out. I don't guess they get it back. I don't know yet, but we're still at that question is still out there.
Wow.
For the answer.
You would think that somebody would be approaching them from the charity community to say, we'll take all your stuff off your hands.
Exactly. And wouldn't that be in the
I think they have whole buildings that are just.
Wouldn't that be in the contract that the city signed with Amazon? I mean, how do you dispose, or if you get returns, if that's.
I have not a clue. I wouldn't suppose off the top of my head that the issue would ever come up.
It probably didn't. We're so thrilled to get, oh, great, we're going to get Amazon. Isn't that wonderful? We're going to have one like North Little Rock. That's all.
You know, the one that I'm would be thinking to ask a question of, if I may suggest you make this call, Jan, is, you know, we have a contract for waste management.
Right.
And it would seem to me that's the function we're calling is, are you now getting, do you expect to get, do your many cities of this national corporation already handle in other communities returns from Amazon locations into landfills that you manage?
That's a good question, and I will ask
if I can suggest that you pursue that and let us know what you find out.
I'm always up for suggestions. I'll follow up with that. Thank you.
Kathy, I have a question.
Yes,
Under the early childhood education, is there any definitive idea as to how this is going to work? I mean, are they going to
yes,
fund,
there is.
they're going to fund payments to existing schools for additional students? Are they going to set up their own programs and run them, which means you have costs associated with that? But I'm unclear as to how this works. If it's helping to get additional businesses, then those businesses are going to have to expand and hire more people, et cetera, et cetera. I'm hoping the city is not planning on opening its own.
No, they're not. In fact, one of the interesting things is, you know, the old phrase about mixing apples and oranges. When I went and reviewed their spending resolution, the non-binding statement about how the sales tax revenues would be allocated, I get down to page 4, and we come to the paragraph about early childhood education. And it's, let's see, let me cite this properly here. It is $40 million a year, or at least operations. I gather that's a year, but I could be wrong about how that could be the 10-year term. But at any rate, they're going to spend $40 million on early childhood education. And then you get close to a full page of text where they specify exactly those things that you asked about. And it's not that the city is going to create and staff its own. It's that they're going to allocate spending in the existing network to those that apparently they have a rating system from, you know, excellent down to barely tolerant in the licensing system, because all of these have state licensing in a quantity of regulations. But they would allocate money to the excellent grade facilities and foster them, I guess would be my summary term for that. But yes, they are very specific about how they would spend this money for early childhood education. Now, this was emailed out to folks, and you can also go to the city website for littlerock.gov and look in the agenda for June 29th, I believe it is. And that was when they voted this a resolution. And so that resolution appears there to be downloaded directly for yourself and review all of this for yourself. I'll say one of the things that the city gets a failing grade on is consistent presentation throughout different versions of the policy in question, because we started out with spreadsheets, and what you have in this final document is all text. And you have to go through there and they pick out the numbers, and it'll tell you whether it's for capital or for operations. And that's when I created my own spreadsheet with a couple of notations of information that I picked up along the way in recent weeks of research, because they mixed apples and oranges. And that makes it tough when you're trying to understand how they would spend the sales tax revenue.
Robert has a question.
Yes.
Well, I want to point out that first of all, they added a sunset provision, but basically 10 years, that could be the rest of my life. I mean, why 10 years? Why not 5 years or 3 years or something? I have noticed I've got a Boys and Girls Club across the street from my house. The city was providing money that helped the kids, it fed the kids, it gave them some people to supervise them, and they had a wonderful playground. But none of the money went to the capital needs of the building, and there's holes in the walls and things like that because the Boys and Girls Club is starved for funds. The city was only paying for staff, for the programs happening, not anything to keep the building maintained. So let's see, that was, I think the sunset is too long. And are they going to fund my Boys and Girls Club across the street? That's all I can think of. There were 3 things. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Apparently the decade-long sunset has become a recent pattern for the city. The last time we had a sales tax was a decade ago. It did sunset. And so we're seeing that end in December. And that apparently was considered to be so favorably practiced that there was this big push for the new one to sunset in a decade as well. So it appears that we're settling into a decade of operation. And then we take stock of what we spent and where we spent it, and do we want to repeat that or change that or stop it altogether. As far as the Boys and Girls Club, there may be some issue with ownership. Robert, do you know who owns that building?
It's the Boys and Girls Club of Little Rock or Arkansas or whatever. The Boys and Girls Club owns it, and they manage Lamar Porter Field and the baseball fields beside it. They're not getting
I
enough
think that
money.
may be Pulaski County. I certainly am not confident of my facts here, but I think that that would need to be researched, because the ownership may be an issue on this whole discussion about your property in the Capitol View station for the community. And
But it's a wonderful building, and it's basically used for after school for the kids during the school year. It'd be great if they had pre-K, you know, early childhood stuff, so they could use the building all day long. But you know, who's going to decide where the money goes?
The city directors clearly will vote that. And keep in mind too, the provision is that in the event this tax is approved and this tax brings in more revenues than they have projected, any surplus may be spent anywhere the city directors choose to spend it. There's no further directive about spending it in a particular area or in restriction of any kind. So there's a lot to think about. We may or may not have any interest in taking a coalition letter of resolution position on the tax. I'm not pushing for that. I'm going to continue to raise questions out of the research that I've done. And I'm going to say that we're now expecting the mayor to speak to us by Zoom, I think, at our August meeting. And we might consider out of that, as a result of that encounter, whether the coalition wants to take any position on the tax at all. So take into consideration, the mayor will speak at our August meeting. I'm going to double check that time. Hang on here. August 14th. And then if there is a position for the coalition, that would be the time we would take it up seriously. Is there anything else that people want to bring before us? Any other neighborhood concerns that we need to address at this time? Then I'm going to say we will adjourn the meeting.
Robert has his hand raised.
Okay, Robert.
Judge Hyatt had the engineers address people at the new bicycle shop right beside the Salvation Army and that restaurant, and about the Southwest Trail, and it is still progressing. Apparently the environmental assessment is a really hard thing to fix now, but Judge Hyatt is very, you know, he wants to complete the Southwest Trail, which will be a boon to Little Rock and Hot Springs, and give people an enjoyable way to travel down to Hot Springs.
Good to have that in advocacy by our public officials. Thank you. Anybody want to bring anything else to our attention? Well, you've got my email address. Keep on bringing stuff to me and I will share it with everybody else. And I'm going to say thank you so very much for your attendance and participation today. Is that a goodbye or a question, Jan?
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Okay, I'm going to say that we're adjourned, and thank you so much for participating.